Hi folks, welcome to Song Tripping. Today I want to do a quick review of a box set of CDs I got not that long ago, a month or two ago. Not a new box set, something I've been thinking about getting for years. It came out in 2014 and it is Bob Dylan and the Band, the Basement Tapes Complete. It's a 6 CD box set, or as they bill it, 5 CDs plus a bonus disc. And I wanted to do a little review of this, talk about the history of the Basement Tapes, what I was interested in terms of this, and why I hesitated for a while to get it, and what are my impressions of the set, the quality of the packaging and the books, and also the music, which is what really counts. How did they do on the mastering? The songs, like what are my overall impressions of the music? So first of all, as I'm sure most of you are well aware, the Basement Tapes is a legendary set of recording sessions that Bob Dylan and the band recorded in, when was it, 68, I think, 67 or 68. And they were up in the Catskill Mountains. And a lot of there were really a couple of houses that they recorded them in, but the most famous one was the Big Pink house, where the band was, they made their own album there, music from Big Pink, which stemmed from these sessions as well. And the Dylan was, this was after his motorcycle accident, which is, kind of couched in mystery, but he wiped out on his motorcycle on a back road in the Catskills, not far from Woodstock. And then he was living up there. The band was up in West Saugerties. And then as he was recuperating from that motorcycle accident, he was writing new material. And these basement tapes were meant to be really like song demos, so that Albert Grossman and his publishers, Dylan's publishers, could sell the songs to other artists who began covering them. And they just are legendary because not only are the songs pretty cool, but there's a sort of sense of Americana to them, like the emergence of a new genre, maybe, and this mystique of like making your own recordings at home. So they have this kind of homespun quality to them, like unvarnished. This is not professional studio quality stuff. And the songs are kind of like out there, but it was a big sort of shift in style for Dylan. And he followed up the Basement Tapes with his album, John Wesley Harding, which in a way I see as a continuation of what he started here. But at that point, I think he went down to Nashville and recorded those sessions with a different set of musicians, very stripped down style. But the Basement Tapes are legendary because they were starting this new genre of Americana, feeling their way into that. The home recording phenomenon seemed to be like something that a lot of major label artists, big names back in the day, were starting to get into. Not just Dylan, but the Beach Boys started recording out of Brian Wilson's house as he was like kind of retreating from public life. And then even the Beatles were recording the Esher demos, circa 1968, which then led into the White Album, which has a very homespun, different feel to it. So there was, something was in the air. There was a certain maybe counterpoint here to the psychedelic music of the day, a reaction to it perhaps, or just a kind of a different direction. So that's what the basement tapes are all about. And I think it was in 1975 they released sort of the official version of the basement tapes. Why? Because the basement tapes were getting bootlegged. And this is also really the beginning of the bootleg era. So Dylan was, at least by my reckoning, was one of the first artists to get bootlegged in a serious way. And here's an example of an early bootleg. It's a very plain jacket here. It's just called Motorcycle. And this is on Wheel Records. Here's side one. And it has the sort of shortened titles here. These Wheels, Mrs. Henry, which is Please Mrs. Henry, Lo and Behold, Tiny Montgomery, You Ain't Going Now, and Tears. I guess that's Tears of Rage. And then on side two, Mighty, that would be Mighty Quinn, Nothing, Dollar Bash, Heavy, Nowadays, Autobiography, and No More. So this is mostly, if not all, material that was culled from the basement tapes. So what happened was they sent these tapes out, copies out to different, to different artists or different producers or whoever. Other artists were covering some of these songs and having hits with them. But then it started to disseminate into the general public. I'm just going to look up to see this particular release, Motorcycle, see what Discogs says about it. So what I found out about this particular bootleg is it looks like it came out around 1971. So it wasn't the first bootleg. It was one of many. But it's one of, so many of these songs from the basement tapes were getting bootleg. And these vinyl copies, bootlegs don't tend to be very good quality. So it's been a bit of a holy grail for people to get at the original basement tapes, which is why eventually they kind of came up with a box set. My next encounter with the basement tapes before I ever got this was back maybe in the early 2000s. I came across a collection called A Tree with Roots, which at the time I think purported to be the complete basement tapes. And I burned that to CD. I listened to it once through, maybe once all the way through, maybe twice, but no more. I don't tend to listen to my burned CDs a whole lot. And of course, no liner notes, no documentation to speak of, stuff that you could find about it online. But it's a good collection, it's solid, but it's still a bootleg. So when this came out in 2014, I took an interest in it, but the price scared me off. I forget what the original price was. But I've been have my eye out for it for years, saying eventually I'll get to the basement tapes. This isn't my favorite period of Bob Dylan's music, although historically I think it's very important. People have been writing about it. There was a Greil Marcus book I read, which I came under two titles. I think I got it when it first came out, and it was called Invisible Republic, which was sort of like a history of the basement tapes and old-timey music that influenced the basement tapes. And Greil Marcus, I'm not a huge fan of his rock journalism. He's pretty pretentious, but it was still a good book, and I learned some things from it. If you cut through the thicket of prose, he likes to overwrite. But in any case, there was this sort of limited interest in the basement tapes. Well, finally, a few months ago, 2 months ago or so, I saw this had come down in price, new. And I got it for, I think around $80 for 6 CDs plus the packaging. So I thought, it's now or never. Let's just do it. Why wait any longer? I waited many years to get it. So I finally got it. So let me show you and tell you what's in here. I'm sure other people on YouTube have done more thorough reviews. But you get two sort of books. And, the packaging is kind of inventive. They use a lot of like the facsimiles of the tape boxes. Here's your first two CDs, and you've got some kind of vintage track listings. A lot of good photos in here and posters. There's the Big Pink album art, which Bob Dylan did that painting. And you get an essay on the importance of the basement tapes, newspaper clippings. Again, lots of good photos. There are the lads from the band in front of Big Pink. And, all the photos were really fun to look at. Wish there were even more. But this is a long essay, which was well done. It was well done. Here's the photography they used for the official Basement Tapes release, which, by the way, was kind of polished. Like they did some overdubs and edits on it. So you weren't getting quite the original vintage Basement Tapes. So then you get an article of historical notes, and that's by Clinton Halen, and some studio notes with Garth Hudson, the keyboardist, organist from the band, who really, I got the sense that he was like the archivist. He was the one who was manning the tape recorder, and he ended up with the tapes. And all these tapes on these that were kind of compiled here on the 6 CDs were remastered, and you get some production notes here. Tape restoration by Peter J. Moore and Jan Houst with Garth Hudson, mastered by Peter J. Moore at the E Room in Toronto, Canada. You can get the link. I'll put a link to the box set on the at Discogs in the show description. And then here's Dylan taking out the trash, by the way. And then you get some more tape box replicas with the other 4 CDs in this format. A lot of the Dylan box sets lately are in this format. Okay, that's the first sort of book. And then the book proper with a lot of photos and posters and kind of a scrapbook. This is pretty much all pictures and also labels and things, clippings, just a lot of good stuff. It's fun to leaf through with as you're listening to the music. I felt like this was nice packaging overall, but to be honest, I wanted a little bit more. So number one, like, where are the lyrics? Like, you're spending like $80 or more for this box set. I think we deserve to have a lyrics book. Like, there's a lot of songs on here, and we should be able to follow along with the lyrics and appreciate those. So that was a gap. And I actually wanted more thorough track-by-track notes. There was some of this you can piece together from the essays, but I just thought, again, for the money you're spending, we deserve to have most of those tracks annotated a little bit more carefully. And I'm sure there's Dylan scholars out there who would have been able to do a fine job. There's a guy I subscribe to on Substack. I think his Substack's called Flagging Down the Double D's, something like that. I forget his name, but I'll link to him in the show description. I mean, this guy does like very careful annotations of like live sets and all kinds of, compiled Dylan stuff. Like, he's like an expert, like encyclopedic knowledge. And like, these people probably would have done a better job than some of the people that put this together in terms of the notes. So I thought that was a slight deficiency. Overall, I'm happy I got it. Let me talk a little bit about the sound quality and sort of the the chronology of tracks as you go through here. I'm not going to go track by track, obviously, just give you some overall impressions. So it does try to mostly go in chronological order, so you can kind of hear the story of the Basement Tapes as you're working through it. So the early, disc one is a lot of covers of old-timey music. Dylan was a real encyclopedia of vintage music. And that's coming out here, and you can kind of hear the band and him like feeling their way into the songs. The overall vibe of these sessions, it sounds like they're having a good time. They're probably stoned, or they've been drinking, or both, and they're just enjoying themselves. It's loose, it's casual, and they're just kind of having fun. And that is sort of disc one into disc two. And then at some point in disc two is mostly covers too, of all different kinds of stuff. And then, you do get some like throwaway Dylan songs on here that like never quite made it onto the official Basement Tapes release, or stuff that he just, kind of left unfinished or unpolished. But it's really when you get to disc 3 and 4 and 5 where you get to the real heart of the Basement Tapes, where these are a lot of the songs that were being shopped around and sent out, and what we think of as the Basement Tapes, like $1 Million Bash, Yay Heavy and a Bottle of Bread, Please Mrs. Henry, Crash on the Levee, Lo and Behold, You Ain't Going Nowhere, Too Much of Nothing, I Shall Be Released, Tears of Rage, Quinn the Eskimo, Open the Door, Homer, Nothing Was Delivered, song after song after song, right? And this is the meat and potatoes. And once you get to this, you get the sense that now they're kind of settling into their groove. They're figuring out how to record the songs, and they're recording multiple takes. So you can sense that now it's becoming more of a project, like they're working at it. And Dylan was writing these songs really in real time, or in virtual real time. And, they're kind of hitting their stride on discs 3, 4, and 5. And then the bonus disc 6, the sound quality isn't as good on these. Sometimes these are like radically distorted or hissy, and these are also sort of out of chronological sequence. So what they did, I think, is they pulled like the really bad sounding tracks and sort of lumped them onto disc 6. But there's still some interesting stuff on disc 6. And, this is a collection that I'll go back to and listen even more carefully, especially to songs that, were, sort of one and done, like he never kind of continued with them. Again, this is where I want to see the lyrics, because I can study them a little bit more. But, yeah, so my overall impressions of this, again, the Basement Tapes, they're not, this is unvarnished stuff, so you have to set your expectations accordingly. Initially, to be honest, like, I wasn't like totally engaged in the first disc or two. Like, it was listenable, it was fun to hear them try out all these different old time songs. And, the vibe was pleasant, but, it's sloppy, sometimes things sound a little out of tune, and it's rough. These are rough cuts. And then, like I said, they hit their stride with like working on the bulk of the songs that, we all know as the Basement Tapes. But what happened as I was listening to it, and I listened to it over the course of about a week, one disc at a time, it grew on me, and like the cumulative effect of the music, it added up, and so the flaws in the recordings receded, and the feel and the vibe and this new genre emerging, like that's what kind of goes to the forefront and it becomes pretty special. So overall, I'm like really happy I got it. It was a grower for me. I think you have to be patient with the basement tapes. You have to let it wash over you. I actually liked listening to the multiple takes back to back. Usually they did 2 takes. On a few occasions they might have done 3. And there you can see, to hear the differences, as a song gets a little bit more solidified or they're trying a few different things with the arrangements. That was fun. And sound quality wise, they did an impressive job cleaning these up, preserving the integrity of them. They sounded good here on the Marantz CD, and it sounds like you're listening to tape, but it's not in an annoying way. Like there's actually a very full-bodied homespun sound, and there's an aura, there's a mystique to the basement tapes, which is partly what accounts for its legendary status, in spite of itself. So that's my little shtick on basement tapes. What do you think of this box set if you got it? What are your opinions of this period of Bob Dylan's career? What's your critiques of the box set? Were you impressed with the sound quality, with the mastering, with the way they packaged it? Let us know in the comments. Thanks always for watching. I hope you'll check back real soon. Bye-bye.